Hi, Julie here. I thought I would do a quick walkthrough on Remnants of Time, which is an image that just placed second overall and first in the photography for the Light, Space and Time Created in Isolation competition that they had. And this whole series that this image is part of, which is the Lonely Man series, was all shot just literally like a week before we went into complete lockdown. So I did it with a friend of mine, Tony, who is a wonderful, wonderful digital artist and photographer as well. And it was shot in the studio, and this is the image that I used in this particular piece of art. He is just got a hat and a jacket over the top of his normal clothes, standing on a grey background. I also shot the key, which is in the image, and the apple on the same background, so that it would be easily extracted and put into this image. So that is the final image, and there's quite a few layers, so I'm just going to turn that off and drop back. So I started with a just a plain white layer, and I added in just a sunset shot. It's not brilliant, it's not even in focus, it was just the pretty colours. Then I added in an overlay of more cloud over the top to give it a bit more definition, which is on overlay at 43%, and then I added a curves layer to darken it down a bit. I then added in this clock, which is a foxy squirrel content, I believe, and I then did a second copy, but I did a radial blur to blur the numbers out to give it the effect that time was racing ahead. But I then masked out the hands and the edge of the clock because I didn't want that to look blurred as well. And then I put some clouds in over the top of that, and just a little bit that I missed in there. And of course there was a shadow on the clock. I then put in my foreground, which is another image from, I don't know what it was, but there was just the concrete pavers that I wanted to place my man onto. I then did another version of the clock, which I have flattened out and changed to multiply at 29%, so it looks very much like a shadow. There is a couple of other shadows here. This one is the shadow for the tree, and I have my raven in the tree. Okay, so this is where I bring Tony in. So I extracted him. That's just a layer mask, so I just loosely grabbed him on the grey and just masked him out. This is using the quick selection tool. I then did two little drop shadows, one just a blob of paint set to multiply at 53%, and then there was a slightly smaller shadow just under his feet, where his feet are actually connecting to the pavers, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. And then this was darkening his face because it was still a bit too bright. So that's Tony done. And then I did an overall brightness contrast layer, so I boosted the contrast and dropped the brightness on Tony, and I also did a hue saturation to the whole thing just to desaturate it a little bit. I brought in my feathers, which are extractions that I got from somewhere. I'm sorry, I don't even know who they belong to. They could be Foxy Squirrel, I don't know. Could be J Maddox, not sure. Then I painted in these birds, some more feathers, and placed a shadow on the feathers. Then I brought in the key, which has also got a drop shadow on it so that it looks a little more realistic. and I darkened it and desaturated it a little bit. I then brought in the apple and tilted it on its side, and I've put shadows in under the apple as well. I then merged it all onto another layer. I did a gradient map, which really was a whole host of colours. I wanted a whole rainbow of colours because I wanted to get blues and purples and oranges and yellows and everything into the one thing. But it's only at 12%. If I put it at 100%, it's way over the top. Then I did a black and white gradient map, which just toned the colours down a little bit, again only on 14%. 3 colour lookup tables, which I generally use a lot, which is tension green and the edgy amber and foggy night. The tension green and foggy amber at soft light at 20%, and foggy night is at normal mode but at 20%. I then did a dark navy blue exclusion layer at 20%, and that added some blues into my shadow areas only. It's quite subtle, but it does soften off the blacks as well. I then did a high pass filter, which you can see really adds the detail back into the image. I did a vignette, and I did a tone curve, again merged it all onto a new layer and took it into Color Effects Pro, and did some mucking about with a few bits and pieces in there. Here I've got here Pro 4, so I honestly can't remember. I haven't got it as a smart filter, so I can't remember what I used on there, but it was probably a little diffusion, a little color extractor, detail extractor, and a few other bits and pieces in there as well. But you could just play around. I mean, I've really just brought out some of the color and extracted a bit more of the detail. You could do another high pass detail and add a hue saturation layer. You don't necessarily need to go into Color Effects Pro, but it is a lot of fun to use it. I then used a texture, which I believe is from my grunge pack, which has been desaturated, so I've taken all the color out, and I set to soft light, and it was set to about 20%, so it gives just a little bit of texture to it, but not a lot. Then I did a second one, which is it has a little bit of color in it, but that's just another, I think that's old grunge. So a couple of my ones from my texture pack, and then of course my signature. And I did another overall curves layer where I brought the blacks up a little bit. So I mean, that's pretty much how I put the image together. I was thinking about the inspiration for it, Salvatore Dali with his clocks, and the whole passing of time. I did originally think I was going to have melted clocks on here, but somewhere along the line I decided to change it a little bit. I still had the passage of time and he's walking towards it, so time speeds up or slows down when you approach the zenith of time, I guess. It's all very conceptual. The feathers and are a symbol of freedom and release. The apple is a symbol of wisdom. The raven is also a symbol of freedom and of wisdom. The clock itself symbolizes, the passage of time, and the key symbolizes unlocking secrets and gaining access to stuff like that. So lots of symbolism and everything in here. The tree could be seen as like the tree of knowledge because it's got the key and the apple and the raven and So, I mean, each to their own. I guess some people will see this and will see something very different to what I imagined. But this is how I basically put all this image together. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.